All right, so this panel is designed in and around personal style. Now, each of these panelists, as you know, they all have their personal styles, and I think you all are very aware of your personal styles as well. But as artists, we find that it is very challenging to describe your personal style in words, right? And full disclaimer, the questions that we're going to go over were sent to these fine folks in advance. So there's not a lot that's going to be sprung on them, right? They had a little bit of time to think about this, but there are a few cards we're gonna hold in our pocket. It is Vegas. We're going to have a little magic here.
We didn't read them, I'm pretty sure.
Good. That's exciting. So, well then, Peter, we're going to start with you.
Okay.
How would you describe your personal style?
Slick. I don't know. In my photography, I mean, I wear really bright shoes. I got style.
Yeah, you do have style. Yeah, in your photography, when you think visually, like what is your style?
Well, you know what's funny? My headshot work is really super clean. Like for years, I never shot on anything but a white background. So it's just white, and that was it. And then I started to mix it up, and I go neutrals now. Now I do gray and black. So I do white, gray, and black. That's really all I do. So it's very clean and simple. But in my portraiture, I like it messy. So it's weird. I don't know. When I shoot portraits, I like a lot of stuff in the frame. But when I shoot a headshot, I just want it to be all about the person. So I would say clean, simple. That's it.
Clean and simple. And that makes sense, because when someone is wanting a headshot, you're really honing in on their personality. And to do that, right, you want everything else to go away. When you're thinking about a portrait, you're in their environment, right? You want to show a little bit more about who they are. Messy. It makes sense. Joel, what about you, your personal style?
Well, I often say I'm an illusionist, and I like to make people look larger than life. So whether you're an athlete or, you know, just a beautiful model, I want to make that person look like they want to be looked like. Does that make sense? So a lot of lighting, emotion coming off, not like expression emotion, but intimate emotion. And so and I love wide angle lens, so I use sort of like that wide sort of close up in your face portrait.
Absolutely. Susan, how would you describe your personal style?
Theatrical.
That's it. Mic
That's
drop.
about
Don't
all I
drop the
got.
mic for real, but yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And sometimes we find that when we think about our styles, if we can, clean, slick, right? If we can just bring it down, if you think about their personal styles, it absolutely lines up. It does make sense. But now let's flip the coin, and you were alluding to it later. What's your personal style when it comes to teaching?
Oh, that's cool. So when I started teaching, I was like, my thing is I'm trying to inspire and I'm trying to entertain. Like, I want people to have fun. So when I teach, I try and wrap my teaching into stories that happen over the course of my career, but that are fun and lively, because I think photography teaching can get boring at times, potentially, and it doesn't with me.
Absolutely. Joel?
So when I teach, I want someone to walk out and say, I can do that. So I err on the side of maybe being like over-explaining things than going the other direction. And plus, I was barely a C student. So I always felt like when I was sitting in class that things went over my head. So I fear that when I teach, that I want to make sure every single thing is explained and I slow it down.
Yeah, and that slowing it down for a lot of people can help, because, yeah, we might jump ahead, but we all have to make sure, especially in a learning environment, that everyone is on board. Susan, how do you feel your personal style sticks out?
So it's funny, like my personal style just in life, in clothing, in photography is all very theatrical, but my education is very blunt and very to the point and very honest. And I use real numbers and I use spreadsheets and I talk about business, and it's just very, very practical, because when I'm looking at education, I don't want to hear life stories, and I don't want to wander around through, things that don't pertain to what I'm talking about. So it's all, how can I cut out all of the fluff and go directly to the applicable things that can help people and deliver that information as cleanly as possible. So it's a little bit of a flip from the work that I do.
You do your own business, don't you, as well? Or?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So it's clear as day. Some of us as photographers have the business hat as well as the creative hat. And some of us, like Bob Davis said in his panel, want and need a Don Davis, right? And working with people, if we don't have those strengths, is very, very important. Now, the reason that I kept alluding to the fact that the three of you have been shooting for a while is because, as we know nowadays, there are more photos taken every year that have been taken in the history of humankind ever, right? We continue growing all the time. So as one is starting photography or wanting to break into a business, and they're looking to find their personal style, we're bombarded with visuals everywhere all the time. How do you suggest, we'll start with Susan and work our way backwards, that one finds their personal style when they're seeing everybody else's personal style all the time, no matter which way they look?
Just stop trying. Honestly, like, I pushed so hard in the early years of my photography business to look at what other people were doing, to go to a ton of workshops, to just pull in just education after education and looking at this and looking at that. And it was overwhelming and it wasn't inspiring. It started to make me frustrated and I couldn't parse out what I liked and what I didn't. And it was when I actually stopped looking at photography and went and lived my life that my personal style started developing. I started going to more theater. I started hanging out with my friends more. I started traveling more. And all of those things made me a better person, which made me a better artist. And if you don't have any kind of internal voice on your own, you won't have any sort of personal style as an artist. So as I get better as a human, I get better as a stylistic artist.
Absolutely. Work-life balance is incredibly important, which is why a lot of artists go to retreats. That's good too. Joel.
I think when you start out, you see a photographer or a group of photographers that you like, and you say, I want to be like that person. So then you might emulate them to a certain degree, which I have no problem with. Eventually, you're going to have to find your own voice. The single biggest problem that we have as humans is as we begin to experiment outside of what we call what's been established, is someone's going to criticize us. And then we pull back. So I always say there's a critic around every corner. You have to get thick-skinned and say, I'm going to do what I love, and I don't care what the critics say, and then you move forward. And one day, you end up setting the trends.
Absolutely. Peter, what do you suggest? How do they find their personal style in a world where they're looking at a lot of people coming from headshot crew with great, clean look? How do they start to make it a little bit more unique?
Well, I mean, I just, looking back at the way I did it, I just copied people. I saw pictures I liked. I was like, I'm going to try and do that. Brad Calcaterra was this headshot photographer who shot me in New York. He shot on a white background and simple, and he did my headshots, and I was like, this looks cool. And I picked up a camera. I was like, I'm going to try this. And then I looked at Richard Avedon stuff, and I was like, I got to do something. This is so cool. And that's why I was like, if it's good enough for Richard Avedon, I'm going to stick with the white background for a while. So if you see work that you like, you can emulate it. But like Joel said, you can only get so far once you start copying somebody, and you have to make it your own. And you'll figure out how to tweak it and how to get it molded into something that is your own. But really, you should be visually looking at every image that you can find that inspires you and fires you up and makes you go, wow, I wish I could take something like that, and go try and take it.
That's great.
We actually do a portrait probe. I have a portrait track on Headshot Crew, and we do this thing called the portrait probe. And every month we're probing a different photographer, and we're having the photographers in my coaching group copy them. And then we give them a prize at the end for the best copy. And some of them are just ridiculously amazing. It's been a really cool project to do. It's an ongoing thing every month.
What's really interesting is my wife will show me a picture of someone that's done my style, and it looks better than what I've done.
No, to you, maybe. Nobody else would ever think it's better.
It is interesting in a world today that, you can come up with this great concept, this great idea, and by the time you post it to social media and go back to check it, there's 3 posts that are very similar, right? That are out there. As you all dive into your personal styles and you think about personal style, both we talked about teaching and visually as well, how does your personal style maybe, do you notice you're saying, okay, I have to stay true to this, even though I want to do this now, I've established myself. Do you ever feel like, oh, you know what, this is too far outside of me, maybe I shouldn't do this, I'm going to classify this as personal work? Or how does that work for you all now?
Is that to me?
To anyone.
Go ahead.
I think that, I always go back to ZZ Top. the two front guys who have the big beards, they started out with that look, and now they have to live with it till the day they die, right? So I think sometimes we feel like that as an artist, that we're stuck with it, but I don't think we are. I try about every 7 to 10 years to completely reinvent myself. But you have to stick with something long enough to get it to stick to the marketplace. And I talked about that on the whole branding concept. So photographers tend to go from one thing to another. They never actually get enough practice or build enough work with one look to make it actually pay off. So I say you stick with one thing for a certain 7 years or something, and then at some point, reinvent yourself and start all over.
Absolutely.
And I mean, the hallmark of what makes my work look like my work, what makes it identifiable, is what I love. It's honest moments, it's dramatic lighting, it's theatrical scenarios. Those things aren't going to change. That's who I've been since I was like 5. I am exactly who I am. But that doesn't mean you have to take the same kinds of pictures over and over and over again. You can take all of the things that you love that make you who you are and push all of those boundaries and just keep exploring. That was a terrible Explorer of Light pun. I did not mean to go in that direction.
Roll that clip, cut it right there.
Right, thank you, marketing clip. There you go. But I will always like what I like. I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and become a light and airy photographer just because it's my evolution. I'm going to love what I love, but I'm going to keep pushing that bigger and bigger and bigger and make myself a better version of myself forever or until I retire. Either way.
Absolutely. Peter, anything to add? You don't have to hit that. Okay, here's the last thing to round it out. One piece of business advice that you would give yourself if you were sitting in that seat over there, but here's the catch. You're starting photography right now at your current age, with your current families, with your current lives, but you're doing a 9 to 5 something else, like a lot of us are out here. How would you start now? And you're starting now, so Headshot Crew doesn't exist, so you can't say you would join Headshot Crew. It doesn't exist because you're starting now, so you didn't have that idea yet. How would you start? What would be your first step?
Does the TNT method exist? Well, no, I did this, I haven't changed my business model. I mean, and I have this belief that you're either creating or disintegrating. So you have to change. And since 2004, I had never changed my business model. And I coached this guy, Tony, and he came up with this method. And he said, you got to change. You got to try this. And I didn't listen to him. And then he bugged me for 6 months. And then in August, it got a little slow. And I was like, maybe I'll try what he did. And I make more money now than I've ever had with headshots using his method. So that would be the business advice I would give myself. Listen to Tony.
There you go.
So the biggest single misconception that I think most photographers have when they enter into the marketplace is that they think the best photographers are going to make the most money or be the most successful. That's how I started out. So I worked on my craft, and I got pretty good at my craft, but I was still starving. So I had to learn how to get art directors and pick up work. I learned a secret, and it was sort of through my studio mate that kind of coached me. But basically, the single greatest reason why I get hired is because the person that's pulling the trigger to hire me is in a crisis. So it's not my work that gets me in the door. It's that someone is run out of options and they have to hire somebody, and my name has been put into their brain. So what I say by that is I market very heavily and keep putting my work out there. And I know eventually every art buyer, every art director, every photo editor is going to run into a crisis. And I'm standing right there waiting for them to pull the trigger on me.
Absolutely. Susan.
I mean, if I were starting my business right now, if I were 42 and had a 9-to-5 job somewhere else, I would start with spreadsheets because I am me. And I am very, very methodical, and I like knowing my numbers. So I would figure out, what is my salary? What do I need to replace it with? How can I go about doing that with photography? What will these numbers look like? And I will start crunching them and recrunching them and trying to figure out how to make them work. Because nothing is more frightening than to just be striking out into the marketplace, and maybe you're getting work, but are you really making money? And then you're at the end of the year and you're like, I made like $3. I would approach it from a very methodical business finance side of things. Because if I want to leave a 9-to-5 and I want to go into photography full time, I don't want to just replace my income. I want to double it or triple it. So I have to track every step that I'm making so that for me, there's freedom in numbers. If I know my numbers, if I know goals that I need to hit, once I start hitting them, I feel freer. So I would set myself goals and I would go about achieving them in a really methodical way.
Absolutely. Great advice. And I'm going to close things out that I would say to all of you, the quote is, experience is what you get when things don't go the way you want. And the three of these up here have so many incredible experiences that I know that you all have lots of questions. So I want to use this last 5 minutes to make sure that you have time to ask those questions. So Susan is going to be at the front of the stage over here. Joel is going to be at the center of the stage over here. And Peter will be at the stage on your right-hand side for the next 5 minutes before Joel is going to have to get set up for his demo. So thank you so much for coming. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you so much. And again, they'll be at the front of the stage for you. Thank you very much.